Welcome to the 100 Master Coaches series featuring master coaches from around the world. Let's journey together on this 100 Master Coaches series with your host, Coach Mel, MCC. Craig Stanton is a master certified coach and faculty member at Georgetown University's Executive Leadership Coaching Program. He has served in a variety of coaching and OD roles, including Director of Organizational Development and Coaching, for a business coaching startup in the federal government, and founder of his own coaching practice, partnering clients to design customized interventions for every challenge imaginable. Now on to the show.
Hello, and welcome to the 100 Master Coaches show. This is Coach Mal, and today my guest is Craig Stanton, and he's from Maryland, USA. Welcome to the show, Craig.
Thanks, Mel. Good to be here. Hi, everybody.
It's good to have you. You know, we had a chat maybe a month back or something, just to get to know each other. And boy, was that a good chat, because we have quite a few things in common.
It's true.
Minus the little puppy. So we don't have the puppy.
We do have kids. So we both are dads, which is sort of similar.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're just going to jump into this interview today. Tell us, Craig, how did that coaching journey begin for you?
Oh, boy. That's a good question. For me, it started around 2010. And in 2010, I was about a little over 10 years into my professional career working for the government here in the USA. And so my original training is I'm a lawyer. And most of the work I had done over the first 10 years of my career was very analytical and had to do with things like policy and budgets and federal laws and all sorts of dry analytical things. And I got a little bored and decided I wanted to make a change. And I ended up going into a job that was basically a second line leader for a whole operating division where I had a number of first line directors reporting to me. What I didn't know is that I was stepping into a situation where the culture and the morale of the organization I was responsible for were really, really in a difficult place. There was a lot of pain and despair and sort of hopelessness in the organization that I was responsible for. So I guess the way I would describe it is that I thought I was going in to do one thing, and what was needed from me was something totally different that I didn't feel prepared for. The organization needed a leader who could really lead from the heart and connect with people at a deep level of trust to help support them through this kind of dark place that they were all in. And I found inside of myself this situation invited me into a different version of myself.
Was that uncomfortable for you? Just curious.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was like one of those, there haven't been very many moments in my life where there's like a threshold that shows up and you have to decide, am I going to cross this or not?
Okay.
And I literally remember the day that I was really starting to see the picture more clearly, what I had gotten into, right?
Yeah.
So there was one morning when I stepped out of my office and I took a long, slow walk around the floor, and I stopped and talked with each person and said hello and, shook hands with people. And I was all about getting to know people and working from this place of real connection with one-on-one. So it was over the course of that hour or hour and a half, as I walked around saying hello to everybody, that I was kind of confronted internally with this decision. Is this something I'm going to stay and do? Or is this something that has too much heat in it for me to be able to be inside of.
Okay.
Too much anxiety and fear, and because I'd never done this before, right? It was definitely scary. And it was in those moments of connection with people on my team that I started to realize, like, I think I just need to press into this and try it out. And it was after a year or two of kind of success in that space. I won an award here, and we got like federal office, and we ended up getting this most improved subcomponent in the federal government.
Wow.
And so the secretary of the department that I worked for invited me to come and talk with him about this. And he asked me, "What are you doing?" And I actually had a really hard time answering the question, because the things that I was doing, talking with people, building trust, stepping into this space in a very personal, sort of three-dimensional way, I didn't think of those things as work, right? I just thought it felt more like I was a priest or something, like stepping into this space of like soulful need, right? So I didn't have the vocabulary to be able to really describe to him what it was that I was doing. So I said to myself, I need to get more intentional about this so that I can really do this in the world more intentionally.
Yeah.
And that's what made me decide to go to get certified as a coach.
Wow. It's like something calling you to explore this part of you. And I'm just wondering, is this that part of you that just never showed up, or was that something already intrinsically inside you and was just waiting for the opportunity to step out?
Oh, that's such a good question. Well, of course, it was intrinsically inside of me.
Yeah.
And I think what had happened was, like, over the course of growing up, I had put on these masks, about what I should be, right?
Yeah. Tell me about it.
And yeah, and I think what happened was this difficulty, this moment of this was real. It wasn't just like some work problem. And it had real depth and kind of called to me. And it was hard to be inside of that space, right? But I think it was important that it was hard. There was something about the difficulty and something about the fear, and being inside of the fear that sort of woke up like the inner child inside of me and invited it back into sort of manifesting in the world.
I hear you. And I'm tempted to ask how this actually manifested, not just in the workplace, but also in parts of your life.
Oh, I love that question. So I think actually one of the things I didn't mention is that right around the same time, my son, who's 12, was born. So I was kind of going back and forth between this difficult situation at work where people were in conflict with each other, and there was just like, we couldn't have a team meeting without it erupting into chaos and violence, verbal sparring. And then I would come back home, and my son, who at the time was he was just over a year, so he would have been 14 months or 16 months old. I'd come back to the kind of oxytocin driven space of dad, and like loving on your babies, and being close in the nest with my wife and my daughter, who was older. So this was our second child. So I think that was actually probably also an important part of what called this forward, that mix of things. The aspiration I set for myself as I went through the coaching program was to be able to kind of get out of my mind and actually be inside that space of kind of magical exploration on the floor with my son, who was seeing the world through fresh eyes, and kind of everything's mysterious. Even the light on the wall is like, wow, like, what is that?
You are speaking in a very metaphoric language right now. I know it's all of that beauty, all encapsulated, all coming out at the same time. it seems like there is this voice somewhere calling you out to be who you're called to be. Do you kind of resonate with what I just said?
I'll often actually with my clients invite them to be in dialogue with the voice of the largest version of themselves.
Wow.
To think about if they're experiencing some challenge or a difficulty, they're often identifying with that challenge or with that difficulty or with the part of themselves that is most affected by that difficulty. And it's sometimes hard for them to step outside of that and realize there are other voices within them that they can be actively in dialogue with. So I think this experience for me was a really important way of anchoring inside of that realization that we all have the capacity to invoke multiple parts of ourselves in any situation, right?
Yeah.
And there's real power and sort of beauty in being able to do that. The best example I can think of the moment when I realized of that calling was in the coaching program, being inside of this community of people who received me so differently than the people in any other part of my life. Like the community of coaches is such an amazing community. As you know, from all of your interviews and interactions with other coaches. And this was my first taste of like being in a circle of intimacy with a group of other coaches. And the experience was deeply transformative and moving. And, you know, I'm still obviously in touch with many of those people, including my mentor from the program, who was the MCC coach, who was the core faculty for the ACTP program I was part of at the time. And, you know, we still talk regularly.
I'm just curious to hear what happened after that. So you got certified, and then what happened?
So I was trying to figure out, probably like many new coaches, how do I get more hours under my belt, and how can I figure out a way to actually just start doing this in the world more, not just as a leader who's using coaching skills, but a coach. So I did a couple things. I got permission to start an internal coaching program at the agency where I was working. And so I started coaching. I program and recruited like a cohort of people into it and got permission to do it and all that sort of stuff. And so I started spending probably 2 days of the week coaching internally. So that was one thing that I did. And the other thing was I was trying to actively find ways to actually coach on the side. And one of the things I remember about that experience was just sort of all the uncertainty about like, where do clients come from? I'm going to put her in my lap. Hopefully she can, maybe she'll be better if she's in my lap.
So good. I've never had a canine on the show.
You've never had a puppy on the show? Here you are, first time.
There you go. So that's fantastic, Craig. I hear you say you started a program in the unit. I'm just wondering, before you even had the idea of starting, was there some sort of coaching available already in the department?
There was no formalized coaching program, but I had the privilege of working for a leader who basically made a coach available to me.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Yeah. And that experience of working with my own coach was also a really important part of this, kind of helping me hear the bell in my head.
So how was that accepted by the people? Was that like the first program and then moving on to other programs that you launched?
Yeah. So it was really well received. And, you know, I think much like my own experience of sort of being with people in a different way, my sense is that's how those first clients also experienced coaching. I remember getting feedback like, I wasn't really sure what this was, but I kind of like it. It's, you know, it's fun, or it's intriguing, or it's, you know, it feels different to have the opportunity to talk with someone in this way at work. And when I was hearing that sort of feedback, I knew I was really onto something. And so I started to almost like make that my brand. And when people would come to talk with me on the side about coaching, I was struggling, I think, for the first year or two to find vocabulary to describe what this was in a way that people would understand it, right?
Yeah, I hear you.
And over time, what I started calling it, the language I started using for it was sort of talking about inviting people into a bigger version of themselves through partnership. And really, it's almost like an exploration. Coaching is almost like an exploration of two people just wandering through the forest. And this is a forest that the client knows well because they've been on these trails before. But what we're invited into is re-examining the trees or the birds or the sounds or the clouds around us and asking different questions about those things.
That's beautiful. Yeah, inviting them for a bit of a walk and exploration into the surroundings, and of course how that reflects onto themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. Obviously such a privilege to be able to be invited into that space with someone.
Yeah, definitely. Were there certain people that was a little bit up in arms at first? They're like, don't really know what you're doing here. The ones that were a bit, look and see kind of before they kind of jumped into coaching.
I think there were probably people who had that attitude, but I wasn't actually paying that much attention to them.
Okay.
So this was a really interesting time for me. I mean, now that I start to think about it and unpack it, like a lot of the foundational things that I do as a coach kind of came from this time. And one of the things that I was learning to do at this time was to actually be myself in the world. Not some version of myself that's thin or two-dimensional or some part of, like, I think up until this point in time, I was probably very skilled at showing like very practiced parts of myself to the world and being inside of that like very practiced aspect of myself, right? So I did all sorts of personal things too. Like I basically stopped preparing for meetings. Even if it were a high stakes meeting where there was a lot of technical content, I was sort of inside the question like, well, what would happen if I just showed up and paid attention to the other people in the room instead of worrying about like what I know beforehand, right? Like, and then doing that and having the commitment to do that and managing the anxiety that times comes up around that, but also being deep in curiosity around what would unfold, right? And that sort of thing really helped me to figure out what it means to actually be with a client. Because of course, to be deeply in partnership with a client, I think one of the things we have to learn to do is to put down our own need for things to be a certain way.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
And what would be that one thing that you kind of let go of?
Oh boy, I think probably the thing I was letting go of was my own perfectionism. A bigger way of saying the same thing, my own judgments about people and places and situations, showing up deep inside of curiosity instead of showing up in assessment, judgment.
Wow. I'm just reflecting on what you've said thus far, right? Coming from that perhaps very structured background, and then coming to finding out that you've put up this narratives all around you that was perhaps comfortable. And then realizing that's not truly representing all of you. I'm just wondering, what was that brave moment that you said, that's it, I'm not going back to that old bit of me?
I'm trying to think if there was actually one moment. I don't think there was one moment. I think it was like a year. I started a practice that I was calling Just One Thing. Like I was seeing the constellations and the waves and the currents and the winds inside of myself for the first time pretty clearly. And it was a lot to keep track of, right? So through this Just One Thing practice, I said to myself, what I'm going to do is just going to pick one thing inside of myself that I see happen a lot. And I'm going to pay attention to that one thing with deep curiosity, without judgment. And I'm going to just see what happens.
Yeah.
So I think the first experience I had with this was probably a period of about 6 months where I started to pay attention to my own judgment, that voice of assessing and judging and summing up, and the sharp lawyer analytical part of my brain, right? And over the course of that 6 months, every time that voice would come online, my job was just to catch it and be curious about it.
Yeah.
And I think it was through that kind of internal work that I started to realize, like, in fact, I say this to my children now, being yourself in the world is almost like an act of revolution. Like bringing yourself fully into a space with all your curiosity and capacity online is very difficult to do.
Thank you for saying that. That revolution begins with us, inside us.
Yep.
Before anything can kind of come out from us, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So as I invite you forward in this years of getting into the profession, tell us about that journey, moving into getting comfortable with that coaching skin. Tell us about that.
Well, to this day, I still do both things. I think you and I are lucky in that we're both connected to a lot of people in this community of MCC and PCC coaches. And so my experience is that many people reach a point in their lives where they sort of make a decision. I'm going to stop what I'm doing as a day job and I'm going to work full time as a coach. And for some reason, I think it's partly because I'm a dad and my wife's a school teacher, and I identify strongly with that part of myself that's like a provider, and I'm a dad. I'm responsible, right, on some level for supporting this home and so there are practical parts of that. A big part of my experience has been working it out. What does it look like for me to bring coaching into the world balanced with the other things I'm doing in the world? Being a dad, being a leader in an organization where I can do some coaching, but I'm not really a coach, right? I think that the experience of doing that over 10 years has changed how I coach. It's not just about any one thing or any one way of coaching, right? It's really much more about like this kind of choir of things, voices. I don't know if that makes sense.
Tell us a bit more about that context of that choir of voices.
I think it's like, there's a way that each of us have, if you are a coach, you work for yourself.
Yeah.
And you have, a lot of times you have your own business, and, there are practical good, like, benefits that come along with that flexibility. You set your own schedule. And I guess for me, I will say the experience of continuing to work inside of a regular, like, full-time leadership job for politically appointed leaders here in the United States has really kept my humility online and sort of helped me on this big part of my journey that's been about how can I be in the same space with people that maybe politically or ideologically or I don't fundamentally agree with.
Yeah.
And we're still human beings. And even if we don't agree, we have so much in common because we're part of the same human family and we have maybe many of the same values, right?
Yeah.
we're probably like, there's so many things that we have in common. And so this practice of constantly having to be inside of and supporting and having a strong working relationship with a rotating cast of politically appointed leaders over the course of, let's say, 20 years now, has expanded me and pulled me into this bigger way of, well, what does it really mean to be in service of other people? And that helps with my clients. I try to give you a more tangible example of that. When I was younger, if I had a new client or somebody that was like a CEO of a company or somebody who was very successful in their own career, I think I would, when I was younger, I would step into that a little bit afraid and a little bit intimidated, like, oh my goodness, what can I possibly do to support this person who's, on wealthiest people in the world list or whatever. Right? Like that sense of fear about like, what am I going to offer was very real inside of me. And at some point I started to realize through being deeply in service to other people that it's not about me. And it's just like, all I have to do is be curious and keep being curious and return to that sense of love and connection and trust and curiosity. And things are going to work out just fine with this client. It's going to go where it needs to go.
Definitely. And you've said that word many times in this interview, that curiosity, just being in that space of you don't need to know everything.
Yep.
And coming from that level of perfectionism, where that speaks about wanting to be in control of certain things, obviously. That shift obviously has taken you to different places of yourself.
Very much.
And if I were to ask you over the last 10 years, what would be a couple of key takeaways for yourself that you'd like to share on this show? Being a coach, obviously, internally and supporting great leaders. Yeah.
Well, I guess first I would say the work isn't what I thought it would be.
Okay.
Just like that first job I described, I thought I went in prepared for one thing.
Yeah.
And no matter what I was prepared for, it wasn't the right preparation. Something else showed up.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. That's a gift. Right. And there's fun in being inside of that like curve of never really knowing like where the next client is going to be and like what they're going to be inside of. And there are themes, right? Because we're all human beings, but it's we all are managing the same central nervous system. We all are managing the same fears and instincts. And the story is different for everybody, as you have pointed out so beautifully in this interview. That awareness of what's the same and what's different, and being inside of that polarity all the time is just it's really a like beautiful place to be. I think that's the first thing. The second thing I said a few minutes ago, it's not about you. By saying that, I don't mean to say the coach is an important part of the partnership. I mean, a partnership means there are at least two parties in deeply in connection with each other.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And as the coach, it very quickly becomes not about you. It's just about letting these larger forces of curiosity and compassion and love and sort of flow through you. It's almost like you're the vessel for these things to manifest. Or at least that's my experience of it. The third thing is that just something about holding our own discomfort with the unknown and with what, because what we're talking about is like really like stepping into a version of your day-to-day experience of the world where you're very much aware of not knowing what's going to happen next. And that isn't always a comfortable place to be. It's a magical place to be, but it's not always a comfortable place to be. And so it's a part of that is learning how to hold your own discomfort and your own fear and your own uncertainty, maybe a different way, a more loving way.
I love how you say it, right? It's as though you're embracing something that you're not comfortable embracing, and yet you're choosing to embrace it and accept it and receive it and love on it.
When you say you're choosing to do it, you're giving me too much credit. I think my experience of it wasn't that I was choosing to do it. It was that I was called to do it or challenged to do it. And it was like, I didn't experience it as choice. It was like, this is something that if you're going to succeed in sort of being this different version of yourself, then it's something that is maybe necessary but insufficient.
Modest as you say it, I see it as a choice. It was a conscious choice, even to raise your game of discomfort to become a master coach. And the requirements, obviously, it takes to get there. It's not a walk in the park.
It was challenging for sure to figure out what is it that master coaches are doing different, right?
Yeah.
How does it show up? What does partnership look like if you're a master coach that's different from the PCC or the ACC or what different from what other people are doing? It's hard. Yeah, it's definitely it was challenging to figure all that out. It's sort of that feeling of like, oh, I had a long day's effort here helping my father, work in the backyard or something, and that sense of satisfaction at the end of the day, like, yes, it was important to be in the backyard with my dad, trimming the bushes and cutting the grass and burning the extra wood and all of that. And it was a lot of effort, and maybe I have some blisters and I'm feeling some aching in my muscles, but overall it's a really good feeling. It feels worthy. It feels I feel full. I feel like I'm in service,
Yeah, of course. That's a silent kind of service, right? When we help dad at the backyard, he looks maybe in the side of his eye, kind of like, yeah, good on you, but he's not saying good on you, son. All right, he's just giving you the eye a little bit. It's like, okay, there you go. And then there's this sense of, as you say it, fullness, right? It's like, I did something meaningful, something deeper than deep. It's fulfilling your deeper parts of you.
Yeah. Sometimes my clients ask, do other people think about these things? Do other leaders really have these conversations? It's always, I love that when people give you that kind of feedback. Like, it's what they're not telling you, just like you said about my dad looking at me. Like, there's a lot that is in that reflection, but so much of it is not being said explicitly. It's under the surface, right?
Yeah. So now, having reached this milestone, what's looking up for you in the next horizon?
Oh, I'm trying to figure that out. I honestly don't know. I think what I'm trying to do is get rid of the need to know, but it keeps surfacing inside of me. So I'm coming up on 20 years of service in my public service position, and for the last 5, I've been coaching and more recently teaching at Georgetown other coaches, which is a very great privilege to be in the position of doing that, sort of meeting other people at the very beginning of their coaching journey, like the one I talked about for myself. It's beautiful to be able to meet people there. And some version of coaching and teaching is probably going to be like soon for me on the horizon, but I'm not quite exactly sure what that's going to look like yet. I'm still working that out for myself.
And I'm sure you get it as well. Younger coaches coming up and asking us about our story, right? And then they also ask about, shall I join the ICF? Or perhaps a sort of body of coaching, right? For various reasons, obviously, to network, to connect, to learn from, to sharpen your sword, whatever. What do you say to coaches listening, younger ones listening to our conversation today?
Well, I encourage them to go check out the ICF website and look at the code of ethics and start to familiarize themselves with the competencies.
Yeah.
And what I say to people is that, coaching is, for me at least, almost like more than a job, right? It's like it's a way of being in the world. And as I said earlier, it's a beautiful community of people. And by being a member of the ICF, it just opens up even more the possible sense of community, or as the Buddhists say, Sangha, that you can have with other coaches in the world. And that speaks for itself.
It does. I've been with the ICF since 2007 and have enjoyed being there, supporting in the front, supporting in the back, at times taking a little bit of a rest from too much of the gathering, and then now missing it because it's a lot of this, obviously, lockdown and online situation where we're just attending events on Zoom. Mm-hmm. It's not the same anymore. And I'm starting to think, I can't wait till I get back to the face-to-face meetings with coaches again.
Yeah, it's true. I miss the face-to-face as well.
Yeah.
But I also feel lucky that through COVID, I still have this connection and this way of, like I just finished a little training program that I signed up for with a pod of other coaches. And so as part of that program, we would do like a Monday hour-long check-in. And so nice. These are, 3 fellow coaches. So 3 of the 4 of us are MCCs.
Wow.
And we just do a check-in where you spend an hour just talking with each other about what's going on. And they're from all different parts of the United States. And it's just having that in your life is, I guess I'm aware that not everybody has that in their life.
Yeah. I have a little theory, and perhaps not just a theory, probably a desire to see the democratizing of coaching. And one of the key areas I sense is that coaching can actually value add a lot in the learning spaces from schools and systems like that, colleges, universities. Being an educator yourself, Craig, how important do you think this is?
I think I agree that it's very important. I haven't worked out for myself what it really looks like yet. One of the places where my thinking here goes is I feel like so many of the intentional practices and intentional learnings that I've had the benefit of as a coach over the last 10 years were very fundamentally different than anything I got in school or anything I got in my own leadership training. School was much more about factual information. And I don't want to diminish the importance of factual information. I mean, knowing your geography and your history is important, right?
Yeah.
But there's a way in which school could be also calling people to some kind of inner journey around, a deeper version of themselves, or a different version of themselves, a different way of thinking about it and holding their identity. And at a time when, we have so many challenges around diversity and connecting with each other and building trust with each other, it just feels like, to your question, there's some way that journey of self, if it were integrated more into our schooling, how we learn as human beings, a more fundamental part of the actual curriculum, could involve actually cultivating trust and being in partnership with other people, and managing your identity and your role. And not only would that be amazing preparation for leaders, it would be amazing preparation as to be a human being. I feel like that's missing from a lot of it's missing from a lot of schools. It's indirectly there in certain types of programs, like maybe there's a hint of it in like Montessori programs or religious school programs where there's a bigger code and a set of like values that are implicitly part of what students in those environments are exposed to. But at least here in the States, in most public schooling and probably university curriculums, it's not as overtly there as it could be.
Well, definitely something to ponder, reflect, and perhaps even kickstart something. I don't know, maybe some of the coaches listening in, or anyone else, could be other educators, maybe wanting to connect with you and start this revolution, obviously beginning with yourself and then impacting more of the community out there.
Yeah, I would love that, to be in more explicit dialogue with people who have thought more about this than I have, or have different ways of thinking about it.
We're almost coming to the end of our conversation. If you had a chance to talk to your younger self, your younger coach self, Craig, what would you say?
It's a good question. I wouldn't say very much. I would probably just offer a reassuring voice that, it's going to be okay. Keep following your heart. Keep stepping into the discomfort. It's all going to be okay.
Very nice.
Thank you, Mel.
Yeah, thank you so much. Now's a great time to kind of get our audience, maybe some of the handles, social media handles that you're wanting to share with us.
The easiest way to reach me is probably through my website, which is called artful.coach. And my business is The Artful Coach. And so I do straight up coaching. And I also do mentor coaching as part of the Georgetown faculty role. I spend quite a bit of time listening to recordings of new coaches and giving them feedback and on their coaching and how their coaching is fitting into the competencies. And that's a wonderful practice as well to deepen your coaching. My email there is theartfulcoach1@gmail.com.
Any last thoughts that you want to share before we go?
No, I think this is the first time I've been on an international podcast. I feel tickled and very privileged and honored to be here. So just thank you so much for receiving me and giving me a space to share some of these thoughts.
You're very welcome. And, I'm going to wish you all the best. 20 years, continue, press on. It's going to be a wonderful journey ahead.
Thank you. I will.
And with that, I say thank you for catching the 100 Master Coaches show today with Craig and myself. Till the next time, saying take care and bye for now.
You have been watching the 100 Master Coaches series with your host, Coach Mel, MCC. Brought to you by Catalyst Coach. www.catalystcoach.live. We will be right back with our next Master Coach on the 100 Master Coaches series.